Has Little Nightmares 3 ruined the franchise? Well, let's start with analyzing the game step by step and weighing out the pros and cons. We start with an introduction to two new characters, a bow-toting boy named Lo and his wrench-wielding companion Alone. As our pint-sized protags traverse the weird and wonderful world of the Nowhere, we find that there seems to be an extra emphasis on the multiplayer aspect of this game. Most, if not all, puzzles requiring the unique attributes of both characters in order to progress. And while co-op isn't exactly unheard of in Little Nightmares, the new mechanic of each tool does add an interesting dynamic to the game. Now, let's talk about the residents. Just like the other games in the franchise, the overarching theme of this game is tiny people navigating a warping world in which they don't belong, while simultaneously playing cat and mouse with a series of endlessly unsettling freaks who call this place home. Little Nightmares 3 is no different, each area presenting us with its own twisted but sadly relatable manifestation of fear and trauma ripped right from the subconscious minds of those trapped here. Navigating each of these areas successfully will have Lo and Alone wind up in the Institute, a building with just the darkest implications. Ghost children wandering the halls, padded rooms filled with children's toys, and an overseer is heavily implied to be experimenting on these poor patients. Until, of course, our new heroes jab the power of friendship right into his eyeball and bring the whole corrupt structure down on his head. And at last, we finally make our escape hand in hand to live happily ever after. Right? Right? So, let's go ahead and weigh this up. Gameplay-wise, it's pretty solid. The controls feel natural, and the mechanics, while basic, operate smoothly. For the most part. There is, however, an uncomfortable amount of jank that takes place, sometimes game-breaking glitches rendering sections of gameplay completely impossible. From a design perspective, again, this game looks like Little Nightmares. The scale and appearance of the characters and the environments, coupled with an impressive set pieces and exceptional sound design, help to retain some of the core values of its predecessors, but still, something just seems to be missing. Which brings me to the final point, the story. And while all the ingredients are there for a compelling and hard-hitting storyline, Little Nightmares 3 relies perhaps a little too heavily on related media to really convey the most impactful parts of this tale, particularly the final chapter. Some of the biggest reveals that this game has are tied into sometimes obscure and niche links to the franchise, which new players just will not pick up on. Even veterans of the franchise would not have a clue on how significant this section is to the overarching storyline if they never listened to the podcast that came out 2 years prior. Overall, Little Nightmares 3 feels like the weakest game in the series so far, and it just feels like it lacks in some areas where its predecessors really excelled. Repetitive actions, unrefined mechanics, and what feels like a disjointed narrative have the latest entry to the series feeling kinda hollow. Not a bad game by any means, but a short runtime and a startling price tag certainly have fans divided. But before I give my final score, we need to wait for the DLC expansion to come out in a year! So until then, I'll leave it up to you.